Hello, you karmically involved people in this third density. Welcome to another video of the Law of One concepts, where I talk about these fantastic and phenomenal concepts that make this beautiful model of the Law of One even more profound. So today I'm going to talk about karma. Karma is a word that is not mentioned too much in the raw material, but when it's mentioned, it's in good context for us to understand other stuff that is said about the mechanisms of how reality works, and we can extrapolate a lot from there. But karma is a word that is very much known in our culture, in our society, but I think it is misleading in some degree. So hopefully I can also give a little bit more of clarity there, as well as put it into context within the Law of One, which is a good way to say as well that the Law of One study is a lot more profound, that I can make it here with this concept of karma. So if you want to know more about karma, the mechanisms and everything else, read it, draw your own conclusions. And I have a couple of videos, at least one or two, that I would leave here for your entertainment and your maybe consideration, and see if it helps, because there was a session where they talk about karma, at least one or two, I forget, but I'll leave it here anyways, and you can check out how that part plays out, because I'm going to read a couple of quotes from this session 34, and that's it. That's all I wanted to introduce karma as a Law of One concept. Remember, this is a word that doesn't come, I mean, it's used, Ra uses it because we have it here in society, in our culture, and that's what I want to define first. Karma comes from Sanskrit and it means action. But again, I want to emphasize the point that our language here in the Western world, or at least the modern language, is language that doesn't describe, like Emerson said, it's fossil poetry, because it doesn't relate to reality as much, but rather concepts as in science. So if I sneeze during the videos, because there's a lot of pollen here and my nose is acting very, it's reacting as it should, allergic as it is. So trying not to sneeze into the microphone. That's karma for me. So, we're gonna get into karma and why is it that forgiveness is the key word, as we'll see. But first, like I was saying, karma is action, but it doesn't mean action like just any action, but it's involved a lot with our activity, mental activity, and how we act towards other people, towards the environment, towards ourselves. And that action, that mental action, how we produce what we do in speech, in thought, in physical activity, all of this reflects on ourselves. And that's why it's called a wheel of karma. And it just simply rotates. That's why Ra used it, because it describes pretty well what our actions mean. And in this process of us moving and doing action, it's always going to return to us. Whatever we do always returns to us. So I'm going to speculate a lot of stuff, but first I want to give you an introduction as to what Ra said when it was asked about karma and how to define it. So let's go read it. When Don asked Ra about karma and to define it, Ra said in session 34, question 4, "Our understanding of karma is that which may be called inertia. Those actions which are put into motion will continue, using the ways of balancing until such time as the controlling or higher principle, which you may liken unto your breaking or stopping, is invoked. This stoppage of the inertia of action may be called forgiveness. These two concepts are inseparable." Pretty cool, huh? If you notice, I highlighted a couple of words here which are involved with forgiveness, inertia, action, and stoppage. These words are going to show in this video a lot, because those are the words that Ra uses to explain the mechanism of karma. It's very simple. We can see it as, like I said, as a mechanic that happens. there is inertia, there is movement, and then there is the stoppage of it. In terms of action and what we do, this karma, what's happening, is invoked by action, and the stoppage is invoked by forgiveness. So we're going to explore forgiveness a lot here because that's what we're all concerned with. But I do want to also cover a little bit the movement, the inertia that we produce, because as usual in the spiritual communities and everything, there is a higher connotation of pejorative or negative meaning to karma, as well as I forgot what there's another word that we use a lot that seems to have always a negative connotation, and I always forget. It'll come to me. But the catalyst, I just covered that. So catalyst and karma are two words that we always see in the negative, because when it happens or when it's happening, we only notice it when it's very hard on us. So in any case, karma is simply action. It doesn't mean that it's negative. It can be positive or negative karma, as anything. It could be good or bad karma. That is determined by us, and it's not determined by any law that exists in the universe. Remember, reality is neutral. We are the ones that put polarity to it, duality to it. So, in any case, I think that's a good description of what karma is, because that is inertia. And that's the first item that I have here, because our reaction to the environment, our reaction to reality is always one of inertia. We create certain understandings and patterns, and we follow those patterns. This is coming from our animal ancestry. And of course, through different incarnations, we continue to produce these patterns. I recently, this morning, had a conversation talking about, funny enough, they asked about free will and then hierarchy, which is really the karma that we're bringing in from the animal kingdom. Hierarchy, we see that present in nature because that is part of nature, to create a sort of hierarchy for survival, for survivability. And so that inertia that we bring in for hierarchy can manifest here as a negative society, as a negative movement, action, karma of trying to put order into things and to create eventually an elite and everything else that we know in this world right now, because it's very obvious. So that inertia is karma. Also, there is the positive karma, which is the simple realization of self, which is what third density is supposed to do for the vast majority of people, to realize who we are. And that generates what I would call positive karma, or the idea that we're going into unity. That is what we get into in third density, whereas in the negative side, we get into the idea that we are separate entities. And so unity, separation, both produce karma, and it's our job to decide which one we use. I'll probably make a little speculation onto the negatives and how they use karma, but I don't want to digress too much. So karma is inertia. Whatever patterns we have on a personal level, anything that we do, anything that we have done in the past has generated karma, continues to generate karma, and we are the ones moving the wheel, as it were, a ship, and veering towards one side or the other, and we're supposed to either stop the wheel or veer it where we want it to go. That's all within limits. There is no proper way of doing anything. These are just mechanisms that are present in our reality, and as students of this reality, we want to understand what's happening. How can we understand these things that are happening to us? We're scientists here, right? So, like I said, there are two things. There's not only inertia and movement, action, but there's also a stillness, a stoppage, a breaking of the wheel or movement of karma, which is forgiveness. And I want to read to you a couple of quotes that Ross said that I think express it really, really well. So let's go read it. In session 17, question 20, Ross said, "In forgiveness lies the stoppage of the wheel of action, or what you call karma." Consequently, in session 34.5, Ross said, "Both self and any involved other self may at any time through the process of understanding, acceptance, and forgiveness ameliorate these patterns. This is true at any point in an incarnative pattern. Thus, one who has set in motion an action may forgive itself and never again make that error. This also breaks or stops what you call karma. Again, the key word here is forgiveness, which is one word that we don't have a very good definition when it comes to spiritual understanding and belief systems. And forgiveness is something that is understood a little bit more when you realize that true forgiveness is really of the self, as Ra is explaining. It is not of only saying, well, I am okay with that situation, so I forgive the person that did this to me. You see, this type of forgiveness is always maintaining the victimhood and the guilty aspect of ourselves. There is still somebody who did something to us, but we forgive him because we're very merciful. And so this is not full forgiveness, as Ra explains. And forgiveness is simply of acceptance, of understanding. And the deeper you get into knowing yourself, the more you're going to be able to forgive. It becomes automatic. For example, if you are able to see the unity in all of us, say for example, my favorite way to understand reality is always the direct path that is used by Ramana Maharshi and Nisargadatta and others who have explained in essence non-duality in a very straightforward way. And in this case, what we go straight to is consciousness, who we truly are. Without the activity of the mind, we're all the same consciousness. This is the fabric of unity that unites us all. There is no separation in the way you are conscious and I am conscious. This is the field of unity. And so when you go back to that and you realize that you are one with everybody, then you see that the patterns and movements, the actions that people have done, they are simply movements. They are activities of the mind. And because you don't associate with somebody like the ego does, there is no somebody, there is only the one self. When you realize this, then forgiveness is automatic because there is nobody to forgive. And in the sense of saying you are guilty, I forgive you, and I was the victim, so there was no guilty and no victim. You simply see that what you're presencing is movement, patterns. Just like in nature, there is no victim, there's nobody guilty. It's movement, it's nature, and we have forgotten that we are part of nature. This is the Tao, this is the way in which things work. So this is the more profound way in which you can automatically understand forgiveness. The other way, which is a little bit more easy for us to use, is simply accepting. There is the use of faith. Faith in knowing that everything that you see is happening for a reason. And all you need to do, because this density is not, as Ra likes to say a lot, this is not the density of understanding. We're not supposed to understand why things happen. We are supposed to accept, if we're on the positive path, of course. The negatives, like I said, I'll give you a little bit of speculation as to how karma works, because that's a question I had myself back then when I was understanding karma. And yes, for us in the positive side, on the positive path, which is the path of unity, then what we're doing is simply trying to understand why we have somebody mowing my lawn right now. But see, that's karma too. So in the positive path, what we're trying to understand is simply, or not understand, but accept is everything. So we accept reality as it is. The other thing, especially when we understand acceptance, is that, like Ra said, all karma is present now. When they said that at any given point in the incarnation, this is true. This rings true all the time, because we are always experiencing our karma at any given moment. So let me explain this in a better sense, so it makes more of a real thing to you and not just some metaphysical abstract thought or idea. What we have is reality projecting itself through us. or rather, we are projecting reality through our thoughts. So whatever inertia and karma that we have, it's trying to project itself and show it to itself, because there's only one self that is trying to experience and balance. That's a key word about karma and the system of karma, is that we have a movement that wants to balance itself. And in this movement is where we see that things are trying to find equilibrium, if you will. And that is through the projection of things. So when people approach you, situations happen, events are unfolding, all of this is your own self, your own karma moving and showing you that. So all we need to do is accept it. Just accept it, love it. There's always a possibility of loving something, no matter what it is. And again, I see how I'm using this as if it's something that affects us. There's also positive karma, which we, of course, we accept gratefully, but this is just how it continues to show. So when people approach me and they ask me, in a previous incarnation, I probably did this and that, and I killed people, and I have had these visions of all the things that I have done in the past. All of these things are part of the past. Yes, previous incarnations. However, that you carry within you, and you're doing all the time, you're projecting all the time, and so reality is always giving you the opportunity to balance these things. And so this is how I see karma. This is how I see reality, in a way that you can always measure what's happening to you in a way that you can balance it. So these two items are very important: forgiveness and knowing that reality is always showing you that this is the moment. There is no another incarnation where you're going to come here. No, if you open yourself to the possibility of balancing all your karma, then sure, a lot of things are going to come to you, but the more you realize that you do not exist, that there is only an apparent self here dealing with motions, then you are open to the universe. And no matter what the universe throws at you, you're able to find love, compassion, understanding, and acceptance over all things. So, the last thing I want to say is forgiveness of self. And I forgive my landlord for sending the Moors here today. So forgiveness of self is the key word here. So let's see what Ra said in this regard. In session 18, question 12, Ra said, forgiveness of other self is forgiveness of self. An understanding of this insists upon full forgiveness upon the conscious level of self and other self, for they are one. A full forgiveness is thus impossible without the inclusion of self. Okay, lastly, we have to talk about forgiveness of the self. How does that apply? How do you forgive yourself and automatically forgive the other person? Well, if you follow my example of, because when you accept something, okay, you may accept it, but you may still have some resentment inside. That means that you still feel, say, and again, I'm using an example of somebody hurting you and you want to forgive the person for hurting you, which is very common. It's really what we think about as forgiveness whenever we invoke the word. So if you forgive the other person but still have some resentment, that means that you're still feeling affected by it. You feel like you are the victim and that person is guilty of doing that to you. When you take full responsibility, then you realize that the other person had no conscious desire to do this to you, but a subconscious, or simply was part of a greater mechanism that is balancing the karma between both of you. We don't know who the other person was in another lifetime, or who he was here and why he was doing this or she was doing that. It doesn't matter. We don't need to find that out. All we need to find is the balance of compassion, understanding, and overall forgiveness. But how does that apply to ourselves is the question. If you realize all of our problems are generated in our mind, all our traumas are generated in our mind, as mature entities, and I mean mature in a spiritual sense, we understand that we take responsibility for everything that has happened to us because we are the ones perpetuating it. As a matter of fact, we are, or should be, our nature is to be a mirror. We are not absorbing anything, we're reflecting everything. And so our minds are retaining a lot of trauma and just negative stuff that it's stuck in there in our lives. And all this this way of seeing life is it's blocking us from expanding so much more our energy centers at the bottom, our lower energy centers, and opening the way of love to the heart. And so as we see this and we realize that yes, there is no separation and everything is just happening for a balancing reason, then we are able to automatically, like I said, forgive, because you yourself can see in the other person. There are so many ways we can do this, but the key thing is always to realize that you are not yourself. What you believe you are is not true, and all you are is that field of consciousness that everybody is, and that is how, like I said, forgiveness comes automatically. But like Ra said, it doesn't come, it's impossible to happen without the inclusion of the self. You're the one generating it. So you're the one that should realize this so it stops. It's not an action. It's not something that you consciously say, but a realization. And that is something that just simply takes practice, contemplation, and overall meditation. So with that, I come to the end of this video. Karma is something that we can explore a lot more, and in the raw material you're going to find it, but mostly you're going to find the mechanisms, and I invite you to simply just read it, watch my videos and other people's videos on this topic, and expand even more your model of understanding of this. That's all I got today. Thank you so much for watching and bearing with me and the Moors. I appreciate you. Seriously. Thank you for all your comments. Like, subscribe if you haven't, share the video, which is awesome. And I'll see you in the next one. Really quickly, I forgot to mention before I finish my video in English, as you can see, I already went through the Spanish one, that I promise you to give you a little bit of a speculation as to how karma works, because I actually thought about this in my beginning stages of all these mechanisms in reality. And if we're trying to balance through love, how does the negative entity uses karma? And you see, to me, the answer may lay in the mechanism in which the negative entity polarizes itself. As it produces karma, it uses the same wheel of karma and it's bringing it back in some sort of event, situation, or anything. And it's potentiating this or energizing these three lower energy centers by controlling, by using this same motion. And I believe there is a part, I just can't remember it, where Ra says or alludes to this by saying that the negative entity uses the energy in a way that it can potentiate itself for more separation. So you can already make the connections and to see how negative entities can use actions that hurt other people, let's just say, and that comes back to them, but they use that to even polarize themselves even more. Maybe the problem for us to try to understand how this works for negative entities is that we are sensitive to hurting other people and to other people hurting us, whereas the negative entities seem to be associated a lot with psychopathy, which is the lack of feeling and regard for other people. So if they have that, they obviously have it with themselves, so karma, when it comes back to them, doesn't affect them. And they actually see it as an opportunity to increase their negative polarity and their separation from self. It is, though, within ourselves that we see this negative karma affecting us because we are simply sensitive to it and we don't want to polarize negatively and we don't want to foster this in us. And so that's how it affects us, because there is a sort of resistance in us. And this is why I believe that negative entities do get their karma. They do have their wheel of karma rotating, but everything that they get back, as opposed to us where we're trying to interiorize it, all they're trying to do is to bring it back outside and keep using it as a catapult to continue to energize their lower energy centers, which again are focused on separation. And that separation is what polarized them 95% or more, so they can be graduated into 4 density and so on, continue with their separation. So anyhow, that's just my speculation as to how these things work. Let me know, what do you think? How does the negative entity polarize itself negatively and continue to use karma in one way or another? Does this make sense to you? Let me know in the comments. All right, finally, yes, I'm done with the video. Thank you so much. I'll see you in the next one.